Welcome to The Real Final Mile, life in big and bulky home delivery, the only podcast dedicated to the delivery professionals that bring your large consumer goods to your home. Welcome back to The Real Final Mile, life in big and bulky home delivery. Today, we have a guest who doesn't just understand this industry, he lives it. Chris Belson is the Chief Operating Officer at Pulse Final Mile, where he helps lead a national final mile network built around big and bulky delivery, installation, contractor partnerships, warehouse execution, client service, and performance at scale. But what makes Chris stand out is not just the title, it's the reputation. In an industry where pressure shows up every single day, routes, customers, product, people, claims, expectations, and everything in between, Chris has built a name around doing things the right way. He's known as a leader who values execution, accountability, visibility, and integrity. He understands that Final Mile is not managed from a spreadsheet alone. It's managed in the warehouse, on the dock, in the truck, and at the customer's front door. It's managed by leaders who are willing to stay close to the work and own the outcome. Chris brings the kind of perspective this industry needs right now. Practical, experienced, honest, built to scale, built to perform, and respected by the people who know what real final mile work actually looks like. We're going to talk about his journey, the current state of final mile, and where the industry is headed from his perspective. Chris, welcome to The Real Final Mile.
Well, John, that was a humbling introduction. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm extremely excited to be here today. I've been wanting to get on this podcast for quite a while, and we've finally been able to align the stars and make it happen.
Well, Chris, I appreciate that, and having you on is an honor to me and to the listener or watcher, however you're consuming this content. One of the things I really respect about Chris is he absolutely puts the operation and his people first, and he is not afraid to tell some guy who doesn't even put pants on, I can't meet with you tonight because this thing happened and I put my people first. So I really respect that, Chris. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and look, I appreciate your patience with me. As you said, look, I put the team first. Ultimately, it's how I pay my bills and how I make sure that the folks on our team eat and live a comfortable life. And unfortunately, we've had a few snafus or client emails that come in last minute that we have to jump on. But looks like we're going to make it happen, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too. So, Chris, for the listeners who may not know who you are, how did you make your way into Final Mile?
It is a very boring yet exciting story. So I made my way into Final Mile, almost 2 decades ago by way of two gentlemen, actually. So I was an employee at Lowe's in a Southern California store, or working on the back end, working with XPO at the time. So they were the provider for their back of store delivery. And the area manager at the time for XPO was a gentleman by the name of Darren Mendoza. And if you've been in the business long enough, you know Darren and or his brother, Mike Mendoza. And I forget the exact situation that took place, but that particular store had struggled for a long time. Couldn't get product staged on time, and I think I might have had the back end for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And Darren pulled me aside one day and said, "You know, I've had this store in my under my area of responsibility for a number of years, and you're the only person who's come through." And I think it was 5 or 6 years at that point, who's been able to turn it around. And he said, "Have you ever thought of kind of joining our side of the fence?" And at that point, I didn't know anything outside of the four walls of a retailer. You know, I thought it was doctor, lawyer, work in a big box retailer, or start a business on your own. And, you know, that idea started to grow inside of my head. And at that point in time, there was some changeover with providers, with other major retailers, and I finally decided to take Darren up on his offer. And I met with Mike Mendoza at the time and a gentleman by the name of Danny Hansen, and it was off to the races when I learned that there was a job where I didn't have to be inside of four walls every day. And I could drive around and interact with different people. I knew, I didn't know it in the moment, but I knew I was onto something special. And that's really what opened the doors for me. And it's ultimately that those two individuals are the reason I sit here today. And I'm lucky enough to have them as a part of our team now.
Well, first I want to say thank you for mentioning those two names. Obviously, two guys I respect tremendously. And I want to be very honest, I've never met them. But
Really?
I respect them because of their work. I have met more people. Obviously, you and I have rubbed elbows in some of the same rooms, some of the same people, retailers and 3PLs. But those two names come up a lot. And specifically, one of the retailers that you mentioned, I was on one of their docks and on the East Coast of all places. And one of the executives from that retailer had just moved from California and had no problem dropping those names. Well, why can't you do it like these guys do it? Why can't you get these guys? And so I take that as a compliment, and I have a lot of respect for them. I do have I'll call it a digital relationship with them. We swap text messages and phone calls every once in a while, but yeah, two great guys. I appreciate you mentioning their names.
It's funny. I know exactly who you're talking about. And that particular individual used to wake me up he was a 4:45, 5 a.m. guy. And every morning he'd say, "Hey, Chris, get up. There's a fire out there you need to put out." And every morning I'd respond with, "Where is it, Mr. Retailer?" And he'd say, "I don't know, but it's your job to go find it. What time are we doing lunch?" But one of my favorite people in the business, by the way.
Yeah, I will say the limited amount of time that I spent with him, I can see that, because great core values, honest person, very straight and to the point. There's no, he doesn't bring a lot of drama to it like some of the retailers do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talked about the moment when you kind of knew, like, all right, this is it. The team is clicking, and then you go on this journey. So tell me about the journey, or tell the listener, the viewer, about the journey of how you went. You landed a vice president role, then executive vice president, now you're chief operating officer.
Yeah, so it's a really long story, actually, John, and that's a very small snapshot in my career. That's really the last 7 or 8 years. But it all started in Chino, California, on a Best Buy dock, working for the company XPO, who's now RXO. And I've held just about every position you can manage, or you can even think of, specific to the operation. So I've dispatched, I've been a supervisor, an assistant manager. I've done just about everything else. If we focus on kind of my current role and the regional vice president to vice president transition, what I would tell you is that I've landed in this seat for one reason, time and time again. I've never really shied away from the work. I hold my team, and I share with my team this mantra: if it's something, I'll never ask you to do something I can't do, I won't do, or I'm not willing to do. And I'm sure you've heard something similar at some point in time in your life. But that's really what's opened each door for me. I'm usually the first individual to raise my hand and say, "Let's try it. We'll pilot it. Let me work on the problem first." And I've really never turned anything down. And ultimately, I believe it's why I sit here today. It's why our current CEO has entrusted in me, the responsibility of leading Pulse Final Mile in all of its functions. But I would say that's why. That's what that journeys look like. First to raise their hand. I don't shut my door. I don't turn my light off until the job is done, or until we have, progress to get us to the next day.
Okay. For those entering our industry, there's a lot of guys that look like me. And so for a young Chris Belson, who's not an old white guy, mm-hmm. What advice do you have for that person who's trying to get to where you are?
The advice I'd give is, I just had a conversation with a nice young couple that you introduced me to in St. Louis. A young man, young woman who are starting out on their own with their own new business. And I'll give anyone the same advice I gave them, someone who comes from my background, who hasn't been in the business their whole life, who's a brown guy, I would tell them that there are a lot of spaces that historically we haven't stepped foot in, a lot of rooms we haven't walked into. And I would tell you, you don't take rejection or disinterest as a cold, hard shutdown. Just because someone isn't interested in you or isn't tapping you on the shoulder looking for more, looking out for what some would consider your best interest, it doesn't mean that they're not interested in you. What I've found in my career and in my career journey is that it's unfamiliarity that I have to push through, and I'm going to be very transparent with you here. I have a very close friend, and I tell this individual all the time. He's a young African-American guy, just like myself. I tell him all the time, sometimes when you walk into a room, you are the first person at your level that the individuals in that room have ever encountered in that position. I don't know, outside of Joel from Ryder and a handful of other individuals, I don't know too many young African-American men who are in a position like mine. I think I'm here because I've never taken no as a solid no. I've always pushed past and said, well, why? What else can I do? And I've tried to over-index in the networking department. There will be no bigger advocate for yourself or your business like yourself or like your business. And so I try to meet everyone. I give everyone the time of day. I share my ideas. I am more than willing to work after hours to impart my knowledge or ask questions, look for additional mentors. And I would tell anyone trying to get into this industry or follow a path similar to mine that, no door is closed forever. Right. And just because someone may give you the cold shoulder or doesn't give you the time of the day, it just means they're unfamiliar 9 times out of 10. And you've got to help them familiarize themselves with you and what you're about, and always put your best foot forward. Right. You don't have people talk about first impressions and how that can close doors for you. And although I think it's true, as long as you are true to yourself, right, and you are sincere and you always put your best foot forward, usually people come around. Usually the opportunities you're looking for will come to fruition, so long as it's supported by hard work, transparency, right, empathy, all the buzzwords.
Did you always know where you wanted to go, or did you know you just wanted something better?
I would tell you I didn't have a clear vision for what I wanted to do professionally. What I did know, and it was something that was instilled in me at a very young age, is that if you're going to hold a job, right, you might as well put all your eggs in that basket. And over time, after a few positions, a few different companies, I realized my goal is actually to go to the top. And I say this because every time I've taken a position, I've realized, the next step isn't that far from what I'm doing today. There's the gap is usually just a skills gap, or a tools gap is the best way to put it. My boss is in the position he's in because he has a few additional tools that I don't have. He's got a network that might be a little bit larger than my own. So I didn't always know where I wanted to end up, per se, but I knew after a number of years in this business that the next step was always attainable. It was only a half beat off from what I was doing currently, right? Once you learn the core basics of this business, you promote up through the ranks, really based on your work ethic and your decision making, right? Can someone rely on what John or Chris puts forth? Are we willing to put money behind that? Are we willing to gamble on that relationship? But yeah, to keep it simple, I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I could always do more. I knew I could gather that hammer, that screwdriver, and put it in my toolbox to take the next step.
10-year-old Chris feel about where you are today?
Well, 10-year-old Chris would probably be disappointed that I'm not a pilot. That was my childhood dream. For whatever reason, I was intrigued by aviation to this day. And those who know me the best would tell you that this is a fact. So when I'm overwhelmed or when I have a lot going on, I will drive to my local airport, so John Wayne Airport, and I'll sit. There's a small business park where you have direct access to the runway through some bushes, through hedges, and I'll sit there and work and take conference calls. So that's still a passion of mine. It's a goal for later in life to obtain my private pilot's license. So 10-year-old Chris would say, "Hey, what happened to that? How come you didn't? How come you didn't chase that dream down?" But I think I'd be proud of myself because 10-year-old Chris was. I'd second guess myself quite a bit, right? And I always looked out into a crowd and thought, "Well, I'm just happy to be here," if that makes sense. But that guy's on the pitcher's mound as a starter because he's better than me, obviously. Someone made the decision to put him there over me. So he's clearly better. So seeing where I'm at today as a 10-year-old, I'd be proud that you didn't look out into the sea of competitors or coworkers and just accept the fact that you weren't doing more, or you weren't in a higher position, or you didn't have more responsibility. But I think he'd be proud, and he'd still say, "Hey, go figure out how to become a pilot. You're not joining the Air Force anymore. You're too old for that. But go get your pilot's license." And thumbs up.
That's awesome. What does it actually look like for a COO running a national network to stay close to the business?
Yeah. So staying close to the work for me, John, looks very different depending on the role you're in. So today I have far less time. And I'll tell you this, I tell my folks that the higher you promote in any organization, the work doesn't disappear, right? I compare it to this. When you're on a dock, you're making 50 to 100 decisions a day. Who do I assign to this route? How do I respond back to my client? How do I handle this customer interaction? So you make far more decisions. But as you move up in my world, I make far fewer, but the impact is far more significant than they once were. The way I've learned to keep close to what's happening is not by looking at a scorecard or a P&L. Those are all lagging indicators. They're telling me what happened yesterday or a month ago. I stay close by surrounding myself with a team of people that I trust, right? That are transparent, both with myself and their direct reports, and we have a rhythm in place. Right? There's things we look at on Mondays and Tuesdays. There's different things that we look at towards the end of the week. So that's what it looks like for me, right? Having direct connections to the people who are responsible for those scorecards or P&Ls that I just referenced. And then having a two-way dialogue, an open door where we can talk about the problems, where they're okay coming to Chris and saying, "Hey man, we've got 5 routes potentially sitting on the dock tomorrow," and they're not afraid of my response. I think most importantly, though, they understand that we're all in this together. And it's something I learned a very long time ago, that as a leader of people, you can't be the individual who simply pushes work down or criticizes decisions or points out shortcomings. As a leader of people, of business, you've got to be the person who says, "Okay, fine, issue, 5 trucks sitting on the dock tomorrow. How do we solve it?" And then I understand that I have a role to play in that equation. If they're coming to me, and most of my team will tell you this, if they're coming to me with a problem, it means they've gone through 3, 4, 5 other people and they couldn't solve. And I recognize that I have to help. And that's how they help me stay close to, the work that it is that our folks execute on a daily basis. So it's slightly different than, being glued to my laptop or, having constant touch points with a customer. I stay close to the action, so to speak, by way of my team members, right? They're willing to bring it to me, and I try to stay engaged. I try to help solve problems and remove obstacles every day.
In your opinion, what separates an average final mile operator from a great one?
An excellent final mile operator truly enjoys what they do, right? This is an individual who enjoys the problem-solving aspect of the job. They enjoy the customer service or human interaction aspect of the role. We say it all the time. I say it all the time. This is 100% a customer service business. And if I unpack that a little bit, it's a human business. You know, the businesses that we work with, John, pick up heavy things every day. They move heavy things, they install, they assemble, they remove heavy things. That's, believe it or not, it's the easy portion. What Pulse does, what RXO does, name a competitor out there, at its core is exactly the same. I think the differentiator, when I go, man, that is a really good operator, or that's a really good organization, I can tell. We used to say in retail, when you walk into a store, you know it's a well-run operation. There's a feel. There's a smell to the place. There's a shine to the floor. And it's the same when you meet a new operations manager, a new director. You know they're in it because the relationships are at the forefront. Those are the most important. And they're a problem solver at their core. Like those two characteristics there, amongst a host of other things, are the true differentiator for me, right? Just about anyone can do the job that we do, right? What takes you over the edge, what makes you great is being a hard worker, right? Being a problem solver, not the scorecard's okay, I'm within tolerance, no one's asking me any questions. Taking that mindset and going the next step and saying, well, I'm at a 4.9 right now. How do I get to a 4.95? Right, I want to stand out. I want to move this business forward. I want to make a name for myself, my location, whatever that may look like. I think, again, those are the two differentiators in my mind.
You described the current state of big and bulky right now. There's been a lot of news recently and a lot of talk. I'm curious, what's your perspective?
Look, I think there's tremendous, believe it or not, we're coming off of the NHDA's annual forum. And so I've had a lot of these conversations over the last 2 weeks. And I think our business in general, right, big and bulky, kind of final mile white glove delivery is in a good spot, right? Our business is growing. We're not going to see the same uptick we did from during the COVID year, so to speak. But I would tell you the housing market is the number one place that we look internally to kind of determine what the next 12 to 18 months look like. And I think we're in a lull. Right. I think with kind of the geopolitical climate, what's happening in the Strait has stifled growth in our business. But like everything else, I'm a firm believer in the American economy. We will bounce back at some point. Fuel will stabilize. The Strait will get solved, and it'll hopefully be an amicable resolution. But whatever kind of the economy throws at us, John, this business is resilient. We'll figure out new ways to grow our business or to sustain what we have. But I think the next 12 to 18 months will be relatively flat. But if I'm going to look through my crystal ball, I would say the next 2 to 3 years in our business will be really exciting times. And here's why I say that. I spent an hour or so speaking on a panel about AI and what it's doing in our particular space. I think the implementation of AI is going to unlock new revenue opportunities or savings opportunities where we can kind of realign a lot of our workforce to become more efficient. But it also means that many of our competitors are going to be able to knock on the door of e-com or e-tailers and unlock new revenue opportunities with them, new service opportunities with them. As kind of brick and mortar plateaus, I'd say, that volume is now shifting online. And I think that's going to open up new opportunities for different verticals in our world. If you're not into four-wall, it's something I'd suggest all of us look into. There's a heck of an opportunity as retailers try to figure out how to maximize their supply chains and maximize profits. They're going to look to companies like ours to say, hey, I don't want to be in Bozeman, Montana. I have customers there, but I can't afford to go there. What can we work out together? But I think we're, again, in a lull today, but the next, I'd say 24 to 36 months, I expect this to turn around and we'll start to see positive comps and new lines of business come through.
So what do you think the industry is getting better at right now?
But what the NHDA is currently doing with the AFMP program, that to me is the next big frontier. We are finally getting together as competitors, kind of who share the same space, and saying we want to establish a standard for our business. And I think we're looking at safety. We are looking at carrier compliance, ensuring that who we say is going to be on that truck and crossing a threshold is who they are. They're safe. They're accredited, right? You can be comfortable, Mr. Retailer or Mrs. Customer.
What do you think retailers misunderstand most about final mile delivery and installation?
I think they don't understand at some points the importance of the service, our carriers offer. A lot of times it's looked at as a pure commodity, meaning we did the hard work up front, right? We sold the product, we had it in stock, our sales associate smiled, we closed the deal. And they forget that that last mile, that last leg to the home, oftentimes it's the only time you deal with a representative of X retailer. And they don't invest as much time, energy, and or resources in this portion of their operation. They entrust it to us, but I think they miss a huge opportunity to develop really strong relationships with their provider, be vulnerable with us, right? Tell us what your fears are, your concerns are. Tell us what you really need from us. I think that's a missing piece in this relationship. And there are many retailers out there, John, who figure that out. But I think that would be the biggest gap or biggest opportunity I see with retailers, their biggest misunderstanding of our business, that we are a core piece of your overall customer experience. A lot of times we are the only piece in your customer service experience.
What do final mile providers misunderstand about retailers?
Unique situation here at Pulse, where our CEO grew up on the retail side of the fence. I was once on the retail side of the fence. One of our VPs, Travis Kanga, spent 2 decades there. And I think we have a hard time looking at things through another party's lens, especially our client's lens. We unfortunately, there's an arrogance sometimes on our side of the fence where we focus only on our roadblocks, if that makes sense. It's hard to find carriers. You don't understand the amount of work or amount of time it takes to onboard a truly safe and compliant carrier. Or I can't just flex up 5 trucks overnight, and I can't then drop another 5 trucks 2 days later because I have to keep work. I have to keep these relationships alive with these carriers, or the capacity won't exist. But we forget, or we don't understand that the retailer they're the source of everything for us, right? They're the reason we have work. They're the reason our carriers have work. And we often don't put ourselves in their shoes. We don't understand that this push to add 5 trucks or to go to 1 day out where the standard used to be 3 days out is because they're trying to drive sales. They've identified something in their line of business that there's a hole, there's a gap, there's a blind spot, and they're trying to address it. And if I could tell my people anything, is when you receive a request from a customer or a client that may seem unreasonable or that you don't understand, take a step back and remind yourself that individual has someone that they report to, or they have shareholders that they report to, and they have a responsibility to sell. They have a responsibility to provide an amazing customer experience. And if they're asking, it's because they're trying to solve a problem. What I would challenge everybody to do is say, well, I may not totally agree with that approach. Help me understand what we're trying to achieve, and let me come to the table with a potential solution. I think that's what we get wrong often. And I am guilty of it. I have been guilty of it, but I try to remind myself that they are the tip of the iceberg. Everything starts with our client, whoever they may be. And it is my job to find a way to say yes, even if that answer is no, but here's what we can do, right? Unfortunately, I can't produce 13 trucks more than what we normally run for tomorrow. But what I'll do is I'll open up another day, or we can lengthen the day for another hour or so for the next 30 days. I think that's the biggest gap that I see. That's the biggest misconception or lack of understanding in that relationship.
Skills will final mile leaders need that may not have mattered much 10 years ago?
If you kind of look out over the horizon right now, what you'll see is CEOs of major, Fortune 50 companies are stepping aside. And there used to be, or the requirement for a CEO maybe 5 or so years ago, 10 years ago, was that they needed to be supply chain focused. As we go forward in our new world, you are going to have to be familiar and have the energy for AI. Plain and simple, right? Your skill set has changed. It's not, are you good with numbers on the fly, right? Are you a good people person? As new managers walk onto our docks today, when I started, it was a spreadsheet. And when I say spreadsheet, it wasn't Excel. It was literally a printed spreadsheet that we tracked our business with. Now you have to be a Microsoft 365 expert. You can't just be familiar. You need to be proficient in Microsoft 365. And that just doubled, right? Innovation in our world has tripled overnight, where you've got to be familiar with AI. As an organization, you need to be investing your time and energy into finding the right tool, because you can't kid yourself and believe that, if our policy, which it isn't, if our policy is, no AI, I don't want our information in any tool, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever it is, you're kidding yourself if you think your people aren't leveraging those tools on their personal phones, personal devices. But I think you're going to have to be very familiar with AI. You're going to have to be extremely computer literate. But I'm going to still go back to what I said earlier. On top of all of that, those are just new tools you're going to have to be proficient at. You still need to be a people person who's big on relationship building, right? Honoring your commitments, and you need to be a problem solver. Period. Point blank.
How do you think technology is going to change the relationship between the retailers, and I'll take it a little bit further, providers, contractors, and customers?
Oh, amazing question. And I think it's a very simple answer as I see it. Transparency is what is going to come of the new tech enhancements. So I think of kind of, if you run a four-wall today with a small kind of regional retailer, I can tell you whatever I want to tell you with respect to my completion rate, my on-time rate. Technology will now enable that retailer who maybe didn't have the money or time to invest in an OMS system. I can sit down today with Claude and the right permissions from our IT department and build out an OMS system. And then I can tell my 3PL customer or my 3PL provider, you're going to use this moving forward. So I think transparency is going to be the ultimate result. Our carriers, and I appreciate this, our carriers come to us now far more informed than they've ever been, because they have ChatGPT in their pocket. They understand what it should cost. We've created tools for them to calculate a load. How much do I need to make if I'm renting a truck and I pay a driver X and a helper Y? What should I be asking for? But I think that's going to be the result, right? You're going to have to be a transparent operator and a very truthful operator to be successful as we move into the future. Because if you're not, technology is going to expose that. Right? You say your on time is this. Well, it's a lot easier to track that now. It's a lot easier for you to validate when a carrier says to you, well, you have to pay us a stem charge because this road on Google Maps has a bridge and that bridge doesn't allow a truck over X size underneath it. That can be validated like that. That's a quick ChatGPT question. But that's where I see things headed. And I welcome that, because it handles, or it addresses in part, something we spoke about earlier, some of our bottom feeding competitors out there. It eliminates some of that noise. It eliminates the ability to give false information to a client or to misdirect a client.
So what is one belief that you have about Final Mile that might be unpopular, but you think is true?
I think this is the best and most exciting piece of or node of transportation out there. Now, obviously, I'm biased because it's the world I work in, but there's no other node of transportation that I'm aware of where you are truly dealing in logistics and transportation. But there's no other node where you're interfacing with a customer, you're interfacing with a client. You are seeing that product from packaged on a back of a truck or in the back of a 53 footer into a customer's home. So I think those who do this or work in our industry understand that as maybe a reality. I think those outside who maybe work in ocean or air who would argue with me. But I think this is probably the most exciting node of transportation as I see it. I'll give you another unpopular opinion. For a long time, John, you'll hear people say, our business will remain unaffected. Sure, robotics will come in and they may displace other parts of the supply chain, but they'll never affect us. I actually do believe robotics and automation, AI, technology in general are going to substantially impact our business on a go-forward basis. But I don't think it's going to impact us in this kind of doom or gloom way. I think what it'll do is it will probably eliminate different types of roles, but it'll force us to become more efficient in what it is that we do. We'll have to learn new skill sets because part of my job I know will be replaced by some sort of AI tool at some point in time. I can see a world where, AI comes in via a mobile app, let's say, or a camera, if we ever cross that threshold, that does some of the work our dispatchers do for them. It takes a picture of the home. It understands pre-existing damage. I no longer need someone to validate that. And that dispatcher won't be displaced in the Pulse world, but they're going to have to learn new skills. And I think that's an unpopular, maybe opinion, but it's a reality that's coming.
When you think about your legacy, what do you want your impact on Final Mile to be?
When it's all said and done for me and I leave the business, I would hope folks look back on my career and say, above all else, he cared about each and every one of us. He cared about me, the customer, right, or the client. He cared about me, the dispatcher who's now a director. I hope that's my legacy, right? Folks sometimes ask, hey, why do you do what you do? Because I work hard. I work really hard, probably to the dismay of my family. I spend a lot of hours in this office, in this seat right here, and on the road on different docks. But I do it because I know someone has banked or has bet on Pulse. They've bet that they can feed their family, and they've entrusted their future, their family's future, in Chris Belson, in Rick King, and Pulse Final Mile, and all of our leaders, right? And so when I leave, I hope that they realize, man, that guy actually cared about us. It wasn't about getting the next truck off the dock. It wasn't about winning the next piece of business. I could care less, right, if I built the world's biggest business at some point and it sells for 1.5 billion. That to me is less important today, as being looked upon favorably, right? And having folks look back and say, he was able to help me, right? He listened to me. For those I work with, and you've interviewed a few of them in this business, they'll tell you, I will always answer the phone. There's no real secret, right? I won't tell you exactly what we charge, but I want you to succeed, right? There's companies I've worked for that I'm no longer there. They're competitors. They want our business. They want to take market share from us, but I want their people to succeed. And I want them to have a place to go to work to every single day. And I want their kids to say, I want to do what mom does. I want to do what dad does. And I hope that's my legacy, that he was a good guy and he cared about us. And I know I could trust him with my future.
Well said. Nice.
I hope so.
If you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing in big and bulky home delivery tomorrow, what would you fix?
The economics in our network. And I want to unpack that a little bit. What I mean by that is, in our country today, we are so used to the Amazon effect, right? Faster, cheaper, now. And what happens when the Amazon effect hits is we, the consumer, we drive our prices down, right? But I go to Menards because Menards is cheaper than name Ace Hardware, my local Ace down the street. The unintended consequence of that is there is less money to go around for the individuals performing the work. If I could pay everybody the dollar amount that they wanted, I would, right? And I feel like margins are getting much tighter in our particular business because of that effect. And there's a lot of men and women who perform the job, our carriers, who are making it by on, a fraction of what we all believe they should be making. So if I had a magic wand, I would fix that, right? And I think the onus is on individuals like myself to be able to have educated conversations with our customers, to be able to land, right? When I commit to a certain service level or our team commits to a service level, we have to hit that every time. We have to raise the bar in order to demand a rate that can give our carriers top dollar, right? That's what I would fix, and I don't know if my magic wand actually works, but it's something we're working on as an organization now to ensure that, Rick will say this all the time, our CEO, that Pulse sits on top of a three-legged stool. A three-legged stool supported by our customer, our clients, but most importantly, in this equation, our carrier. And oftentimes the carrier is forgotten, right, or taken for granted in this equation. The work is the work, the pay is the pay. You're just going to have to do it. But we've worked really hard over the last number of years, right? We're 4.5 years old at this point. We've worked hard from day one to be able to say two things. We honored our commitment as a 3PL to our customers and our clients. And B, we've always paid what we believe is a fair wage for all the work that gets done. And we try to incent. Sometimes you have to get really creative, right? We don't believe in flat rates in our world. We believe in we will compensate you for the work that you do. If you complete 15 stops, you shouldn't get the same amount as the guy who only completed 11. You need to have the ability to impact your business, to impact the paycheck that you give to your employees. And I think we're doing okay, but it's an industry-wide opportunity at this point that will need to be addressed over time. That's what I'd use my one bullet on.
Common and popular answer to that question. And hopefully, I quite frankly hope I live long enough to see that problem fixed.
Sounds good.
Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't cover?
Whether you keep this in or not, you're probably going to have to chop that up. I actually want to turn the tables on you,
okay,
John, and because I understand you were kind of one of the founders, you were a principal in the AFMP program, the accreditation program. I'd like to hear your thoughts. What was this born from, right? Where do you see this headed in the next 3 to 5 years? Because folks like myself, organizations like ours, we're excited for it. We're looking forward to kind of raising the bar and being able to put a stamp of approval on the individuals that we partner with every day.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you asking that question. Bill Lekos will appreciate you asking that question because
I'm sure he will.
Yeah, we're starting the marketing piece of this. These guys want to learn. They want to be better at what they do. Yeah, so I'm going to answer this honestly, and I'm going to give Bill the same rights of refusal that you get. So when I do all the editing on this, I'm going to send it back to you and say, Chris, you good with it? The honest answer is this, I believe there's one missing link to this being the greatest thing that's ever happened to our industry. That missing link is the retailer. And now I can tell you honestly, in one-on-one conversations, as recently as yesterday, Bill and I are getting told the same thing behind closed doors. And I'm not going to mention the retailers' names, but there's only one retailer in the United States who has said, we want nothing to do with this. But our provider can do whatever they want to do. But every other retailer that we're talking to is saying, yeah, I'm all in. So where I see this going is the way the AFMP is set up is going to be the same. Nobody's going to be forced to participate. All we're saying is, if you want access to some of the premier work in the country, in the industry, we're asking that you become the best. And to become the best, we're asking you to prove it. And it's no different than you asking a plumber to go out and get a license to install a washer, a dryer, a dishwasher, electrician to rewire a house. You have to get licenses for that. It's the same thing. We're asking you to come to the table with a certification that says you are a professional. So where I see it going is, I see our industry getting so good at what we do that your magic wand works.
That's a really good answer. Look, I can tell you we're excited. I think it's long overdue. It's something this industry has been working towards, and it's an idea that's been thrown around for since I've been in the business. And this is a very meaningful step forward. I look forward to what the next 3 years look like. And to your earlier point, I think the men and women that we partner with on a daily basis will welcome a program like this. Like no one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be mediocre and I don't want to get better. I don't want to be more efficient. And I think this is a means to that end, right? It's a step in the right direction. And I look forward to it. I'm actually a supporter over here.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you for joining me today. I think this has been a phenomenal discussion. And I want to say this while I'm recording. One of the things I really appreciate about conversations with you, I had to work really hard to shut up because your answers are so thorough. And I'll just say this to your leadership, your organization, your CEO, the other folks that you work with, they're blessed to have you on the team. Guys like you don't come along every day, and I'm just glad we're friends.
I appreciate that, John. I thank you for even thinking of me to be a part of this conversation today. I can't blush, but I'm blushing under here somewhere, and I appreciate knowing you, my friend. I look forward to the future, and I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
If you deliver big stuff for a living, this is for you. Refrigerators, sofas, bedroom sets, treadmills, home gyms. You are the one who turns a tracking number into a real thing in someone's home. And whether anyone tells you this or not, you are the face of the brand the second that door opens. Now, here's the question. Are you walking into that home as just the delivery guys or as trained professionals who know exactly what they are doing? Doolin Strategy Partners have been in logistics for about 30 years. We've seen a lot, but we are still learning on how to be better today than yesterday. Anyone who claims to know it all, steer clear of them. They are a claim waiting to be filed. Most drivers and helpers are thrown the keys, given an address, and told, figure it out. Figure out how to move a 400-pound fridge around a tight corner. Figure out how to deal with a frustrated customer. Figure out how to protect floors, walls, and your own back. That is not fair to you, and it's not safe either. Here is the good news. You can level up your skills, your confidence, and your value. That is where Get Doolin training for the final mile comes in. It's built for you, the people in the truck, not just the people in the office. We focus on the stuff that actually matters on the job. How to protect the customer's home, how to avoid damage, how to communicate like a pro, and how to represent yourself like a real professional, not just a driver. Here is why this matters for you. When you are trained and certified, you make fewer mistakes. You deal with less drama and fewer callbacks. Customers respect you more. Retailers and 3PLs see you as the crew they can count on. That is how you become the go-to team, the one they request, the one they keep, the one they pay. You already do the hard part. You lift, carry, climb stairs, deal with weather, traffic, and tight spaces. So why not get the credit and the confidence that comes with real training and certification? If you're not using Get Doolin yet, why not? You want access to training that is made for final mile delivery, not some generic motivational video that has nothing to do with what you do every day. You are not just delivery. You are the last mile, the final impression, the reason a customer says, "That was a great experience," or "never again." So invest in your craft. Download the app. Get Doolin training for the final mile. It's not hard to find, and the value is clear for your customers, for your company, and for you, the professional walking through that front door. Thank you for watching, and welcome to Get Doolin Training, the only platform out there listening to you and providing real training that adds value. Doolin Strategy Partners has you covered here.